because I've got the preamble. There's always the preamble. Got the credits playing, and and welcome to the Pagey train. Today we have on the show James Nolan Neylan. James Nolan Neylan.
Neylan, yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks, mate.
Oh man, what a rolling start today. You're just a recent you're a fresh batch filmmaker. And I wanted to get you on the show today to talk about a documentary that you worked on. I think it was a couple of years back, where you went to East Timor. What was the name of that documentary?
Yeah, so it was last year. It's part of my sort of final year at Western Sydney Uni. I went over with Dr. Wendy Chandler. So the project's called Mobile Stories. We document 10 tertiary students in East Timor and also 10 students in Sydney. There are the sort of 2 to 3 minute length short films for each student, as well as like a photo gallery and stuff. It's going to be launched online. It's kind of a sort of a transmedia project as such. Yeah, we did that. I was over there in June, July last year, and we've been in post for the East Timor stuff second half of last year, and now we're just finalising the Sydney story. So yeah.
Okay. Oh wow. Man, time flies. I remember you were over here doing an interview, and because of COVID, like it just feels like so long ago. So you only, like in my mind, I thought you went and did this like 2 years ago. That was only last year. So you guys obviously haven't released it yet, or?
No, not yet. We're sort of in the final stages. I guess the Sydney stuff has really kind of been affected a bit by COVID, because it's hard to nail down the students anyway, let alone when you can't kind of get close to them. And Wendy's sort of she's building the website on her own, so that's a lot of work there, and she's a perfectionist, which is really good. So yeah, it's coming along. Hopefully, middle of this year. I guess it really depends on what happens with Corona and when we can get back out to work together and stuff.
Yeah, it's really hard to predict, especially what's going to happen at the end of the crisis. But before we go, I'd like to a big shout out to Wendy Chandler, actually. She was, I don't know if you know this, but Wendy was my supervisor for my honours degree. So a big shout out to Wendy.
Yeah. I mean, she definitely, most of the academics are well aware of sort of what you've done and Made in the West and that kind of thing. So anytime your name's mentioned, she definitely, speaks up about one of her wonderful students, Ross.
Oh, really? Oh, gosh. Oh, you're making me blush. Oh, that's lovely. That's great. It's been a while since I've seen Wendy, actually. She's one of those sort of women that has a couple of cats and a couple of chooks up in the mountains. Yeah, she's a mountain woman.
Yeah, more than a couple of chooks now. Like she's got quite a few. But yeah, she loves her animals. She's got her 2 Timorese daughters up there as well now. She's got Dominguez, who's finishing her HSC equivalency. And Eva is just starting her English lessons to eventually get into university. So yeah, she's a really great. I mean, she's been a huge influence on me, sort of professionally, as far as understanding editing, because that's kind of her wheelhouse, I guess. But yeah, I think she holds a sort of a place for you in her heart because of that Timor connection. She's really strongly connected to that country, not just through her daughters, but, she's essentially been going to and from there, for sort of 20 years. So, I mean, it was a really, I guess that's, I really got a lot from the trip as well, just because, of her connection. She was able to really kind of get us into the culture and meet the people, so to speak. So I'm really eager to get that out and, show you all.
Yeah, well, it will take us on the journey, though. Okay, so you end up signing up to doing this documentary, which is a pretty sweet gig. You're like, all right, we're going overseas. We're going to go interview a whole bunch of people through different towns. So did you arrive? Now I'm testing my own. I've got my wires crossed. It's not. Is it Dili?
Yeah.
Is Dili the capital? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Nailed it. So did you start off in Dili?
Yeah, look, so, I mean, I'll describe that sort of first day for you. So I mean, I kind of knew what I was getting myself into because I'm a mature person, so to speak. So I understood what East Timor was and what Dili would be. I understood what going to a nation like that would be. But we spent about 30 hours traveling. So there's a flight from Sydney to Darwin. Then, we don't fly out from... We get to Darwin at about, I think it was 10 or 11 at night. And then we fly out again at about 6 or 7 a.m. and we're up the entire time. Then we land in Dili, and it's just, the airport is what you'd imagine in like a movie for any kind of developing or third world country. It is just, there's dust and smoke in the air the moment you land. Like you're just walking off the tarmac into this little kind of place that's been built 20, 30 years ago, maybe. It was just, it was sparse. Security was thin, but present. And then we get out into the street and, there's a few sort of semi-broken down scooters and you can kind of hear the sounds of a city, but it's not the same as in a Western city, obviously. It's really like you're hearing the chickens crowing and that kind of stuff. It's really...
it's a rural sort of country.
Yeah, incredibly rural. Even people living in the city, they really don't have a lot of money. So a lot of them will keep chickens. I mean, cockfighting's huge. So every family's got their prized rooster. So you just like, that's one of the things that I'll always remember is waking up with the roosters crowing in Dili every morning. But anyway, so we land there and we're 10 students. Most of them are in their early 20s, and we finally get to where we're staying, which is a former UN compound. And
I know where that they used to be called Untayet. It's a big white building.
Yeah.
Oh, just to I suppose I've got to give a bit of context here, for our listeners. I've actually been to East Timor as well. I was there as a peacekeeper 20 years ago. So that's why I'm interested in your story. I should have given a bit of context before we got into this conversation. But yes, Untayet, the Untayet building. So you arrived there.
Yeah, and it's relatively comfortable given that it was a former UN compound. They've got like a gym there. There's a pool. There's a little restaurant in the centre of this sort of little compound now. They actually put a wedding on while we were there during that month, which was quite interesting to see. But so we settle into our rooms. Everybody's packed in. We've got 3 boys in one bedroom unit, and the 7 girls, the students, were all packed into a little villa on their own. And the drama, so to speak, starts straight away. We don't have any safe water. There's no food. We're starved. We've eaten nothing but airline food.
Airline food is not food. So you had something that resembled food, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. It had hints of flavour and nutrition, but so we're kind of, I guess, and we don't sleep for that first sort of 36 to 48 hours almost. We're just like, everybody's excited as well. There's really kind of intimidating prospect to land in this, really poor country where we've got no ready access to fresh water. We don't know what we're doing food-wise, like just no idea at all. And everybody's just really, really worn out. It was kind of intense, but it's also like, I mean, I don't want to, I'm not complaining. Like, it was all just part of the experience, it's really, that kind of describes the whole month we were there. Like, there was a lot of kind of like intimidating prospects as far as what we were doing as filmmakers. Just traveling around in that country is incredibly difficult. One town we visited, Hadabaliko, I think it's about 100 k's out of Dili. So you'd think 100 kilometers, it's really not that far. It took us over 8 hours to get there. And that's not because, we're slow and stopping to see the sights. That's like the last 30 kilometers, I think, took about 4 or 5 hours alone. It's really kind of insane. It's just like the roads are almost non-existent. When the monsoons come, they get washed away. So you're really just kind of four-wheel driving through these incredibly kind of dangerous roads. But it was
they are incredibly dangerous. I do remember that. I spent I think it was 9 hours in the back of a Unimog going from Dili to Ballabo, and just for our listeners, that is an incredible journey. That's like I would say about 3 or 4 bulleye passes put on top of each other from Wollongong, that with a track that's generally washed away that isn't there. So I do. Yeah, so I suppose that aspect of travel hasn't changed in Timor.
Well, and I would think too, it's probably improved somewhat since you were there. Because you've gone over at a time of great kind of, destruction in the country too. So, even though it is a poor country, it is rebuilding. That they do have some sealed roads. But yeah, it is. I mean, it's kind of insane. Basically, no one goes to the south side of the peninsula because it's just traversing is just insane. You just can't do it. It's on foot or on motorbike. You can't get big vehicles over there.
Yeah, there's no roads that direction, from what I remember. I used to do a lot of trips between. Did you end up going to a place called Batagade?
It sounds familiar, but we didn't go. I don't think. Maybe we've passed by it or something.
Yeah, you would have passed by it because you've got Batagade, and then you get up to Ballabo through up in the mountains. But you did get to Ballabo though, right?
Yeah, we did. Most of our shooting was in the opposite direction, but we spent a day trip going down to Ballabo. Stopped on the way to visit a subject who lives just outside of Dili. But yeah, we got up there. It was really, I think, speaking just from I guess I have a bit of a unique perspective from the other students I went with in that you and I are the same age. So I remember everything going down in East Timor back in the day when you would have gone over. One of my sister's boyfriends years ago, he was stationed there when later on in 2006, 2007, when they had the sort of civil unrest issues over there. So I was very much aware of the country and the history. And we watched the Ballabo 5 as part of our, what is the movie called Ballabo?
I think it's just called Ballabo. I didn't actually know about it until I got to there. I went, you've probably been to the same house. There's a house in Ballabo where 5 Australian journalists were murdered. I think it was in 1977. And they were murdered by Indonesian, not police, but by military, I think. And
it was the military,
man, I don't know if you've experienced the same thing. When I was there, it was a burnt out wreck. It still had the Australian flag painted on the wall, just like in the film, but it was worn away. And it was just an eerie place. Even the locals, because the locals, they're very superstitious, and they believe that ghosts live there, so they wouldn't like to go in there. Is that house still there?
Yeah, so Australia House, they call it. That was actually where the journalists lived. The building that they were actually executed in is just across the intersection, so to speak. I mean, it's a tiny town. It's sort of just right across the road. That Australia House has been restored as part of a sort of, I guess, a memorial to those journalists. It was, I guess, a couple of Australian companies that had essentially put together a fund to have it be a museum now. So when you go inside, everything's been kind of, at least, I guess, restored to kind of its original state, and there's some sort of plaques and memorials to the journalists. The flag is very faded, but it's under glass on the outside wall, so you can sort of see that. It sounds silly. I mean, I never really kind of, I'm not a spiritual person by any means, but I definitely sort of feel energies in places like that. I don't know whether it's just because I go there with a certain kind of emotional baggage or psychological baggage, but you definitely feel it. You feel it there. And actually, I was lucky enough. sort of everybody else had gone up the hill to, it would have been where you were stationed, the former Portuguese fort on the top of the hill there.
Yeah, the big castle fort. We used to call it the castle.
Yeah. So everybody went up there. I was buggered, and I just couldn't be bothered. And I needed time away from everybody at that stage of the trip. It was coming to the end of the trip. So I had my camera, and I just kind of wanted to soak it all in, because it was really, Balibo of all the towns seemed like it really hadn't been touched much since all the troubles. Like, it was pretty much a kind of a ghost town. You didn't really see a lot of locals around. Again, it might have just been my own baggage that I was bringing with me, but there was something in the air. It felt really kind of thick. And so I walked up to that house where they were executed on my own. It's really like they haven't touched it. If anything, they've let it kind of go to ruin, which I don't think is a bad thing. I don't know that you want to really glorify a place like that.
Yeah, no, I just think it's part of their belief. They believe that they just let it go to ruin. When a ruin's a ruin, they let it go to ruin. So it would have been, even redeveloping Australia House, they would have had to have some sort of negotiation into why they would do it and explain the importance of its preservation. But just for your knowledge, though, I didn't live in the fort. I lived down the road from Australia House. So I was, as you're looking at Australia House and the fort's behind you, I lived about 100 metres down the road on the left.
Yeah, so look, where you were staying was probably, you would have been maybe 20, 30 metres away. I mean, obviously not knowing exactly where you were. So that's the same side of the road that the actual house was that they were executed in. But yeah, so I went into that house with my camera. I took some pictures. I've not really put them online or anything, because I guess, I don't know, not that it feels disrespectful, but I just don't know. I don't know what anyone might get from them. I think if you're actually interested in that kind of history, I would really encourage people to sort of go to East Timor anyway. But Balibo is a very important spot, I think, for Australians to visit.
Oh man, it's on my bucket list. I'd love to go back. Like when I was there, everything was gone. Like everything was a smoking ruin, pretty much. There's in Dili, there's this eerie thing that sort of it didn't click to me until later. There is a picture of Stalin in Stalingrad, right, where there's a statue of girls dancing in a circle, and there's a similar fountain in Dili. And when I went past that place, it was just full of bullet holes and ruined by explosions. And there's this peaceful sort of monument in the middle of all of this destruction. It's one of the most eerie experiences of my life. All right, sorry guys, we just had a internet failure, and we're back. So James, you're up to talking about a statue in Balibo.
Yeah, so I guess sort of you talking about seeing that statue of Lenin, and sort of, I guess, the moment you had with the statue in Timor. So there's this. I guess it's just an odd kind of cultural space, and the way that the sort of East Timor is, the history really kind of, I don't know, it's odd. There's this statue in Balibo, and it's of this revolutionary figure. He's like, it's got a sort of ammo belt across his shoulder, like Rambo, standing shirtless in the middle of this fountain in Balibo. And I asked Wendy about it. And it's an artifact of the Indonesian occupation. There's a lot of that. It's this really kind of, I mean, it's an inspiring country from a sort of a political revolutionary standpoint. I mean, it's one of the youngest countries in the modern age. It achieved its independence. And it's got all these, I guess it's still rebuilding 20 years later. And it's got all these artifacts of, the 400 years or so of Portuguese occupation and colonization through to, when the Indonesians took over in the 70s, and now they're only just getting to a point where they're even able to kind of start building their own stuff again. It's really, I don't know, I'm still, 8-10 months later, still unpacking it all, and what it all means and what the country means to me. It's a really, it's an inspiring place. It's really, it's shocking in ways as well. But yeah, it's a must visit. as far as I'm concerned, especially considering how close it is to Australia.
Yeah. Well, yes, I do definitely need to go back there, but I do remember my one of my plane rides there was in something that resembled a HB pencil. But it's certainly on my bucket list to go there. But after Ballabo, so you went and continued, and so what was the object of the documentary? Were you interviewing locals about? What were you interviewing them about?
So I guess it's
Not to give too much away, though.
Yeah, no, look, I think we can give a fair amount away because it's really it's about these individual stories. So to give some context to the project, like I said, it's been 20 years of rebuilding since you were there and since they won their independence. So the country's gone through a lot of turmoil, and it's only just getting to a point where it's starting to be able to kind of look after itself with no help from Australia, mind you, given everything that's happened with the control of their natural resources.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anyone out there that's interested, the Timor Justice Forum on Facebook, they're really trying to do a lot to get the word out about the injustice that's really kind of been visited upon Timor, but also the Australian whistleblower that revealed that information about us spying on their government during negotiations. But so anyway, there's a bunch of these kids that are in their sort of 20s to 30s that are just getting into or working through their tertiary education. And the education system in general is fairly sort of it's very underfunded. It's very primitive in a way. Kids are, because of the troubles too, a lot of these people in their 20s, they've not been to school regularly over the normal or what we would consider the normal schooling period. So they're getting a lacking education. They're not really getting out of the schooling system at a time where people in the West do. And so I guess Wendy's objective really is to kind of capture what their experience is. And then with the Sydney stories is to really kind of provide some context. Like they're one of our closest neighbours. We've got ties to them going back to World War II that aren't dissimilar from our brothers and cousins in PNG.
Mm-hmm.
They helped our soldiers over there in Timor, defending our nation's borders, and yet we've really kind of neglected them. They're one of the poorest nations in Asia. We've got an extremely high malnutrition rate. Something like 50% of children have developmental issues as a result of malnutrition.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, from that perspective, there's a massive humanitarian story. But I guess we also wanted to show, we don't want our stories to just be about those sort of negative or sad things. I mean, there are, but all of the people that we cover, the 10 students, I mean, they're working incredibly hard with a lot of setbacks to not only improve their own lives and the lives of their families, but for a lot of them, it's about improving their country and bringing more resources and money and advantage to their country. And one of the guys I sort of directed his story. His name's Olandino. He's from Hattabaliko. It was one of the first towns we visited.
Mm-hmm.
He left home at primary school age and went to live with his cousins in the town of Hattabaliko because his parents lived outside of town, just so he could get an education. His parents didn't even want him to get an education because, they're subsistence farmers. They need people working on their land just to eat every day. But he sort of, I guess, sacrificed his family life and moved to Hattabaliko to get, this is just a primary school education. So he's under the age of 12, leaving the family home to go get an education. And then when he's in his teens, takes it upon himself to leave his hometown of Hattabaliko and go to Dili, the largest city in the country, and try to get a high school education. So he's like in his late teens, going to school during the day and then working as a security guard and doing other jobs just to pay his school fees. One of our subjects literally crushed cans and sold the sort of the thrown away fish from the local fishermen to get himself through school. So, and I mean, that guy in particular that was crushing cans, he's now travelled internationally to learn modern farming techniques in Israel and other countries, and is taking those. Yeah, he's taking those techniques back to East Timor. He had a job offer from the Timorese government to work in their sort of, I guess, agricultural. And he turned that down because he wants to do what he's been doing and take his techniques around to the local farmers and empower them to grow crops that then feed the markets in cities like Dili. He's really a really impressive guy. His name's Victor. So yeah, I guess it's about telling these stories, like, showing that despite their sort of disadvantaged beginnings, there are a lot of people in Timor that are trying to, bring great improvement to their community, whether that's local or at a level of the country. But and hopefully that just shed some light on the plight of the Timorese and how it is that we might be able to help them as our neighbours.
Yeah, I think my experience with the Timorese people is that they're very stoic and very extremely polite. Surprisingly polite. Like sometimes you expect people to be nice and courteous, but they're super courteous. I've always was blown away by that. But how was your tetum? Did you pick up any tetum while you were there?
It's Uituan, which means so. I'm pretty confident I could take a bunch of ignorant white people there and guide us through some basic interactions. I could make sure that we had water and food and beer and maybe some whiskey, but other than that, it's a bit rough. I guess the people though are really they're really eager to talk to you. The moment you can even just say hello, how are you? In Teton, they'll just switch to English, or they're broken English to sort of make up a conversation with you. Like you're saying, they're really courteous, really kind of respectful. Like there's a definite hierarchy amongst respecting your elders and that kind of stuff. Walking through the villages, everybody says hello. Like we were told by our fixer there, say hi, say how are you. Anytime you pass anybody on the street, they won't stop necessarily, but everybody's saying Diak Kalai.
Diak Kalai. Are you good or bad? And you go, Diak Lai.
So it's Diak Kalai it literally translates to good or bad. It's a question. It's like, how are you going? Diak means good. La Diak means not good. Diak Los means very good.
Yeah, Diak Los. That's the one I was trying to remember. Very good.
yeah. And Uituan means, so.
So. But we're almost out of time for today. But before we go, they have an up and coming film sort of culture as well in East Timor, or Timor-Leste, I should say.
Yeah. I mean, the Timorese, my impression is that they're really kind of very culturally focused. So yeah, there's some local production houses working, basically trying to capture as much as they can about their country. People are making films and that kind of thing. There's actually a really very strong artist presence in Dili. It may have just been the circles that we were sort of going in while we were there, but there's a Arte Morris, which is an art school there, really interesting local artists there, and there's an art collective sort of along the beach in Timor as well that are they're really it's really interesting. I mean it's like you'd expect with any kind of art collective in the West, really. They have a fascination with reggae and Bob Marley, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff.
They used to come up to you going, because you'd be in uniform and, doing some pretty cool things. You're either defending people while they vote or you're feeding people. And they'd always come up to you, Buffalo Soldier. And they were, very chilled, man. Extremely chilled.
Yeah. They're all really good people. I mean, I can't say it enough. It's a really great country to visit. And I think it's a burgeoning kind of tourist country too. There's so much beauty there in the people, in the environment. You really do have to go back, man. I can't wait to show you our films, because I think you'll see just how much it's really kind of changed, maybe how much it hasn't changed. And I'd imagine you'll feel the need to go back once you've seen that footage.
Yeah, great. Well, so what's the name of the film again? And I know it's hard to predict when it's coming out because of this crisis, but so what's the name, and where should we look to go and see this film in the future?
So it's called Mobile Stories. It's going to be published as part of the Western Sydney University, so it'll come out of the School of Humanities and Communication Arts. It'll be web-based. I'm sure I'll blast it out, and hopefully you'll sort of repost me on your various socials. But look for it in the latter half of this year. I expect it'll launch sort of in the sort of third quarter, hopefully. Yeah, I look forward to showing everybody.
All right, man. Well, that's us about wrapped up. So thank you very much for being on the show, James.
Man, thanks so much for having me. It just, a personal sort of shout out to you for what you guys are doing, you and Misty, with Made in the West and everything. And, thanks for sort of having me on.
All right, no worries, man. And look, and don't forget to check out our latest product, which is Made in the West Rewind. It's on every Friday, and yours truly is hosting it. So be sure to check that out at the Made in the West Film Festival YouTube page. And, of course, subscribe. And, of course, subscribe to the Pagey Train. And if you really like the Pagey Train, don't forget to hit the little bell. I think it's around about here. And, man, once again, thank you for being on the show, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, man.
All right, thanks, James. All right, man, I'll just kill that record. And...